Hello and welcome to GM Runs Game. This is going to be a player's guide for anybody interested in playing the Alien RPG, or maybe you already have a session lined up and you want to get used to some of the basics that you're going to need to get to grips with as a player. Okay, so the first thing we're going to be talking about today are some really basic mechanics, the stuff you're going to need to play the game. And the first thing you're going to need to play the game are two sets of D6s. Now, these two sets of D6s need to be easy visually to tell apart from each other, because there's times in this game when you're going to be rolling some of each of those two sets at the same time in the same dice roll, and you're going to need to be able to interpret the roll that you get across both of those colors. So for example, you roll some of these yellow dice, which are stress dice, sold with the starter kit, and separately with the black dice, which are your base dice. So you're rolling those for your attacks or your movement observation. And you need to know whether you get a 1 on the stress dice, and you also need to know how many 6s you get across all of the dice. So the next thing we're going to look at is how to figure out how many of those dice you need to roll. So you've got your character sheet here. This one's blank, but we'll just make some numbers up for the video. So say with this character we are going to be shooting our rifle, and we're going to be shooting it at an alien, and because we're shooting at an alien and we've seen some horrible stuff, we've got a stress level of 2. That's something that your GM will give you throughout the game. So we've got, as our agility stat line, we have 4, and for our trait, for our talents in range combat, our skills, sorry, we've also got 4. So we're going to be rolling 8 of these black dice, and those are our base attribute and skill dice. We're then going to add 2 of the yellow dice, which are our stress dice, into that, making a grand total of 10. We're going to roll all those dice at once, and as long as those 2 yellow dice don't land on a 1, we've not had any complications as a result of stress. We are then looking for 6s. Those 6s across either of those 2 sets of dice will tell us that we've been successful, and if we get extra successes, we can do some extra bits and pieces, like do some extra damage, or we can do what else can we do? We can knock people down, we can knock weapons out of hands, we can do all kinds of different stuff. All that information you can get out of the core rulebook or from your GM, who'll be able to tell you exactly what you're playing with in the particular session you're running. So that's the first thing you need to know about. The stress level, you can see, is just underneath the player portrait in the top left corner, and then the middle section, which is full up of all of your attributes, of all of your skills. Those are what you're going to be using 90% of the time during this game, and that is to say, not a huge amount, because rolling in this game is really kept for when things are super interesting and a bit meaningful. Okay, the next point to cover off is the story and your character in that story. So if you are a colonial marine, if you are an officer, if you're a medic, it's really important to put yourself in that person's shoes. Now that might sound like something very easy and very simple to say as part of a role-playing game, but when you're dealing with an IP as widely known as the Alien IP, it's really easy to add extra bits of information that you know as a real person from the books or from the movies or the audiobooks. You can add all of that information in, and you can find yourself not playing the game because you know too much. My idea of Aliens is that by the end of each scenario, by the end of each session, you should be able to look back, and you should have created a really nice story, or the characters should have created a really nice story. And some of that story is going to rely on each of those characters putting the alien queen, the egg, the chest bursters, all of this type of stuff, putting it in a box and trying to go into it as new as possible, or as naive as possible. And you'll learn stuff as you're going, and that can all be filled in. But play the game, play the story. Try not to play the meta, because the meta will just take away from your enjoyment of the story. The next point, death is a character. So the Alien RPG is a survival horror, which means that not everyone's going to survive, in my opinion. Death is dramatic. It sort of peaks all of the culmination in anxiety, in stress, in the drama of the story. If characters die, that's okay. Don't get so married to your character that if they die, you're going to start having a hissy fit. This is part of the game. There are things in this game that can kill you like that without a word of warning. Your GM will manage that, I'm sure, but they can kill you just by rolling a dice and it landing on a 6 and you're dead. So try to look at it as, if my character dies, I get to experience that climactic moment as my character, and then I get to play a different character. Maybe I was a scientist and I was carrying something, and then that made something want to attack me to retrieve it. So then you've died. There will be some supporting characters in most of the cinematic scenarios, which is 3 leagues 1 shots for this. There will be supporting characters, and sometimes those supporting characters will be totally opposite to what your character was. So if your scientist has died, all of a sudden you can find yourself playing a colonial marine, and you then get to experience the alien RPG from wildly different angles. And that's something that you should embrace. Death is important. Death is going to happen. Try not to worry too much about it. Try to smile, embrace it, and roll with the punches. The next section is going to be about the art of stress. So we spoke about earlier shooting that rifle at that alien and having 10 dice in total, 8 of which were normal and 2 of which were stress dice. Now that's fairly low stress to have when you're encountering an alien. So let's say you're a Weyland-Yutani company agent. You don't have training on that rifle. So your stat lines, your skill levels are going to be lower. You're more interested in communication and manipulation than you are in shooting in most cases. So we'll say that your agility, which was the attribute, let's say your agility is 2, and let's say your range combat is also 2. And because you're worried about stuff a lot more than a trained marine would be, we'll say that your stress level now is 5 or 4. In fact, we'll say 4. So you are rolling 8 dice in total instead of for the 10 dice that the colonial marine had. But that doesn't sound that different. It's still a lot of dice to try and get a 6 on. But the difference in this case is half of those dice, if they roll a 1, can result in a panic test and can really scuffle your odds. While they're all available to be successes, half of them can really add complications. And that might be a risk that you're not comfortable taking at that point. But if all of your team have died and you have 8 stress and you've got a revolver in your hand and an alien queen that you think is pretty much dead in front of you but could also kill you because you're pretty dead as well, then all of a sudden you'd be rolling 12 dice, 8 stress, and your 4 normal dice to try and get some 6s. And you can totally get 1s on that. You can totally fail your stress tests. But believe me when I tell you, I've seen people roll 16 dice and get no successes and get no 1s on the stress dice to create complications. It can totally happen. You're rolling at, I don't know what it is, a 30% chance of success or complication, which means you're also rolling at 60-70% chance of nothing, of no complications and of no successes. So the number of dice you have doesn't directly correlate to the outcome of the dice roll statistically always. And sometimes when you get those the data that outline data, it can also create some really interesting moments in your story. The last thing we're going to cover is personal agendas, which this is Officer McWeir. She formed part of the party in Hope's Last Day. There's lots of information below what I've shown you here that I've redacted because really it's pertinent to the person who's playing them. So it's stat lines, it shows you body, it shows you rivals, it shows you her personal agenda. And this is really to illustrate personal agendas. So in Alien, every player character, if you're running one of the cinematic campaigns or cinematic scenarios, have got personal agendas. So maybe Janice wants to see the world burn. Maybe she wants to heal everything. Maybe she just wants to build a house somewhere and have a quiet life. Maybe she wants to try and be that Weyland agent and smuggle the alien specimen back to Earth. Maybe she's the Weyland agent who gets that order and is totally against smuggling it back to Earth and sees the danger of it and has to try and figure out what to do. There's lots of interesting ways that you can play with personal agendas. And if your GM is running a homebrew, encourage them to have personal agendas for you as well. It's important that you read the personal agendas carefully. And it's important to know that there are, in the cinematic scenarios, some different acts. So it's based over Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And your personal agenda could change throughout those acts. So it could develop more as the story develops. So it's important to try and lean into it. It's part of the story. You also have autonomy on how you want to lean into that. And it's really nice when you get to the end of a scenario and people reveal the personal agendas. You can then go back and talk about things that happened and why they happened. In the same way that when you watch a movie for the second time and you know that you know the ending, you know the entire story, you can start picking up on the foreshadowing throughout, and you start to see things slightly different maybe, and some things that are disingenuous and some things that are blatantly obvious, but the first time you didn't pick it up because you had no idea where the movie's going. So the personal agendas give you all that fun and all that entertainment. Awesome. So we've covered a great little primer, if you like. We know what you're going to need, and we know how to figure out the dice rolls that we're going to be making so that you can have that ready when it comes to your turn in this game. We know that we're going to be playing the story that we're given, or the story that's in front of us, and how we want to interpret that story. And we're going to leave the movies and the books to one side. They brought us to the table. Now it's our turn to make the story. We learned that death is something that's important in the game. There can be no deaths. More than likely there will be some deaths, and that they are major punctuations in the story, and that they should be treated as such. And that if it's your character that's dying, don't lose it too much. It's fine. There will be another character, or if there isn't another character because of how long is left, then that's where your story ends and you get to sit back and enjoy the rest. We've learnt the art of finessing the stress. We know when we want to really lean into it, and we know when we want to pull back from it. And we've also learnt about personal agendas and how important they are in the cinematic scenarios, that we read those carefully and we treat them as a key part, a subplot of the movie that we're making as we are playing this game. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like. If you want to subscribe, please subscribe. I've got some more Alien videos. I'll be doing some other videos on some Free League stuff and some non-Free League stuff coming up. The idea is to try and build this channel a bit for our community, and share it. So if you've got a group of people that would like to play the game and just need to figure out some of the basics and get ready, share the video and show them. For me though, that's all I have. I hope you have a wonderful day and enjoy your game when you get round to playing it. Take care.